So thank you again for joining. My name is Jennifer Hiltwine, a member of CIT's CRCF team, and today's webinar will focus specifically on completing the budget and budget narrative for the FY2015 solicitation. I've placed all callers on mute to avoid feedback and background noise during the presentation, and I'll take any questions through the questions function of your webinar panel at the end of the prepared remarks and in the order that they come in. This is the last of our live webinars that are scheduled, but recordings of all of the sessions will be available for you to view or revisit from CIT's website. The URL will be on a slide later in this presentation. A recording of this session will also be available by the 1st of next week. If you're interested in receiving a PDF copy of the slides only to review or share with colleagues, please email this request to my team at crcf@cit.org. During this webinar, we'll discuss matching funds and what can be considered matching funds. We'll also discuss filling out the budget template, both the budget and budget narrative tabs, and I'll also cover a few program-specific notes to keep in mind. First, we'll take a look at matching funds in the context of those monies that are supplied toward the project, not in the context of CRCF's matching funds program. The matching funds that we're discussing here today are monies supplied by the CRCF applicant that meet or exceed the amount of funds requested for the project. The match must mirror both the total and annual amount of funds requested through CRCF. Matching funds are a required element for the commercialization program, eminent researcher recruitment program, and the matching funds program. Matching funds are not required for the SBIR or STTR matching funds programs, as the match component is fulfilled by the federal SBIR or STTR award. Matching funds cannot be identified or secured after the CRCF award is made. Matches must also be active and available during the proposed CRCF's project's period of performance. For example, if an applicant secured matching funds during a 3-year grant and are currently wrapping up year 1 of this award, funds that have already been expended cannot be used as matching funds towards the CRCF project. Neither can funds that will be expended after the CRCF period of performance. Matches, at a minimum, must be 1-to-1. Examples of matching funds can be seen on the slide here and within the CRCF FAQs document. These include labor and/or fringe, consumables, purchased equipment, and federal, private, or other grants or contracts for the same work proposed in the CRCF application and aligned with the CRCF project's period of performance. Waived indirect costs are also acceptable sources of matching funds. You would not be asking CRCF to cover your overhead and/or G&A costs, but these would count towards your 1-to-1 match. In general, whatever contribution is made must be specific to the CRCF project. Funds received from the CIT-VIPC funds or state contracts or grants are not eligible sources of matching funds. If you are a university applicant, however, your contributing salary or indirects, which may be state monies, are an acceptable match. The budget and budget narrative templates are within a single Excel document, but are broken down into 2 separate tabs. Both the budget and budget narrative must be completed and uploaded, still as a single Excel document, into your online application. Templates for the budget and budget narrative, like that for the proposal, are program-specific and available for download from the URL on your screen, and then by clicking on the specific program. Matching funds, if applicable, should be recorded and explained in as much detail as possible on both the budget and budget narrative. On the budget template, you'll see a combination of white and yellow cells. Enter data for your CRCF budget into the white cells. Yellow cells are formula-driven and locked. These cells will auto-populate based on the numbers you enter into the white cells. If your CRCF project will last longer than 1 year, please contact the CRCF team at crcf@cit.org to request a multi-year template. Additionally, on both the Budget and Budget Narrative tabs, be sure to enter the CIT reference number and project title in the appropriate blanks. The CIT reference number is a unique number that CIT assigns to your project at the time that your LOI was converted into a program application. This number can be found pre-populated within your online questionnaire. A sample of the budget worksheet, this one for the Matching Funds program, is visible on your screen. The bottom of each budget has cells to calculate the percentage of requested CRCF funds for direct and indirect costs. Those projects requesting direct costs only are reviewed more favorably. Direct costs are those costs going specifically towards the project, such as labor, materials and supplies, or consultants and subcontractors, while indirect costs are those intended, such as overhead and G&A. Any CRCF funds intended for indirect costs, please enter the requested rate in the blank spaces in cells A19 and/or A20. Program-specific caps exist on indirect costs, so as you're preparing your project budget, consult the program guidelines for this information. To complete the budget, note the budget categories by line. Columns separate the CRCF request and match. A reminder that each match, for those programs that require one, must equal or exceed the total amount of CRCF requested funds. The purpose of the budget narrative is to understand how the applicant expects to spend CRCF funds. It also identifies the source or sources, amount, and use of matching funds. For CRCF funds intended for indirect costs, cite the requested rate or rates, your organization's approved rate or rates, and who approved the rate, for example, a federal agency. Like with the budget worksheet, when filling out the budget narrative, enter data only in the white cells. These cells have wrap text enabled, so when you're submitting, make sure this is still intact and that all of your content is visible. This will help the CRCF reviewers capture all of your information during the review process. Please note that correctly completing the budget, and especially the budget narrative, is an expectation of all submitted applications. Review program guidelines carefully for the required level of detail in the budget narrative. Guides are also included this round within the template itself to aid you with this task. Applications that do not comply with program guidelines will not advance past initial review. CIT does not provide examples or samples of correctly completed budgets and budget narratives. However, we'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have about the process. Again, an example of the budget narrative template for the Matching Funds program can be seen here. At a high level, the budget narrative should explain the amount and categories identified on your budget worksheet and detail what the requested CRCF funds cover. In all cases, we ask you to provide as much detail as possible about the requests. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to provide some examples of what we're looking for on a budget narrative. For example, if funds on the budget were allocated to labor, your narrative should explain who, what, and how much. For another example, say that you have two researchers supported by the same CRCF project. Indicate the salary for each person, the time that they will spend working on the project, and in total, the amount requested for their labor. Another example, if travel is anticipated for the CRCF project, and you've indicated this on the budget worksheet, detail what travel might be expected, to where, how many times, the duration of each trip, and its purpose. If funds are expected for fringe, indicate the fringe rate, how you came up with this rate, and what it covers. Under consultants and subcontractors, you might put funds toward an attorney or patent filings, or a subcontractor who will process samples. In this category, explain the funds requested and what they will cover. also indicate the location of the subcontractor or consultant. If any work will be done outside of Virginia, this must be explained and justified. Indicate why this individual was chosen. As a final example, if CRCF monies will be directed towards equipment, describe what is being purchased and its use for the CRCF project. If you are submitting under a program for which additional matching funds are not required, as in the SBIR or STTR matching funds program, you do not need to complete the matching funds section of the budget or budget narrative. However, if you have decided to put matching funds towards the project anyway, please do complete these sections on both tabs with the required level of detail. Complete information on the FY2015 solicitation can be found on the URL on your screen. Resources are available to aid applicants in the CRCF process. In addition to program guidelines, we've prepared an FAQs document with common questions about CRCF and its programs. As mentioned at the onset of this discussion, other webinars that you might find helpful have been recorded and are available to view from the URL here. Should any of the resources not provide you the answers that you're looking for, my team would be glad to help. Send these questions anytime to crcf@cit.org and someone will get back to you. Before we open up the session to questions, which I'll do here in just a moment, a quick reminder about the application deadline. All applications are due to CIT by 5 p.m. on Friday, January the 30th. Late submissions will not be accepted, so please be mindful of this deadline. And with that, we've concluded the prepared remarks, and I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have at this time. Please submit those inquiries through the questions function on your webinar panel, and I'll take those in the order that they come in. All right, well, if there are no questions at this time, then we'll go ahead and pull this session to a close. And as I mentioned earlier, as you may have questions going through the process, be sure to email crcf@cit.org. And if you'd like to review this webinar or others again, it will be posted by the beginning of next week. So thanks again, everyone, for joining today. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks again.